Considering the police claim 25 people are shot in this barrier a day, the armed person they spotted was not taken lightly.
Come. This is the wrong place to be.
All right, y'all, welcome back to Combat Arms channel. Okay, so today we're checking out something that was requested a lot, and I just haven't gotten to it for no good reason, but this is about PMCs, or private military contractors, or private military companies, I think is what it's called. But this one is from Vice. It is pretty old. This is from 2014, but it's titled Superpower for Hire, Rise of the Private Military. Now, I know a little bit about PMCs and sort of like the contracts you can get and whatnot. I've had a few buddies actually go and contract for certain organizations. And I mean, it seems all right. It is, again, very similar to the military. A lot of nuances for sure. I mean, the pay for one, you get paid pretty well. So it is an interesting topic. I will say I'm not the most knowledgeable on it. So hopefully this video can give us a little more background as to sort of how they operate and what sort of experience they have had. I mean, obviously we know like the global war on terror was a big one, but I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that we're not as knowledgeable of. So yeah, it should be cool. Let's check it out. Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Really? I mean, contracting, that's a very generic term. It's not necessarily like a combat troop, but still, more than the military itself.
Rock and roll.
Venezuela, huh?
This is Tony Sheena, owner of Mosaic Security, a private military company that provides elite forces level security for their clients. Tony has a VIP coming into Caracas tomorrow who will need to guard. We tagged along as he scouted out a particularly dangerous neighborhood that we'll need to pass through in the morning.
I wonder what constitutes
It's
a
called
VIP.
the Triple X barrier.
Triple X barrier?
The main issue with this client is we need to pick him up at point A, the airport, and deliver him.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't hire you if I saw your guys doing this. I mean, I get this is like an older video, but holsters have been around for a while.
We need to pick him up at point A, the airport, and deliver him to his meeting at the military installation. But there's no circumventing this.
These guys should be flanking on each side. Okay, he's already seen a potential shooter.
Considering the police claim 25 people are shot in this barrier a day, the armed person they spotted
Whoa.
was not taken lightly.
Come.
No kidding.
This is the wrong place to be. Fall out, guys. Okay, let's go.
Damn, I feel like you'd be a pretty big target though. It looks like an easy ambush sort of situation right there.
We took a little detour looking for an additional route out the main road because it was too dangerous.
This looks like very ad hoc. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it didn't look like there's a whole lot of planning involved. It's like, hey, let's get this dude from this side of this neighborhood to this other side. And oh yeah, let's just start walking around and making sure that we're covering down on stuff. It looks a little odd. Like some guardian angel set up and whatnot.
Although we were able to get out without incident, it was clear that tomorrow's security was going to need to be very serious.
We're at an airport about to extract a client. So the idea is that we've got to get him from here to go to meet a government contractor. There's been a number of attempts on his life, so tensions are running a little bit high.
Everybody recover.
Is this like a scenario right now? It looks like it, right? I have no idea though.
So there's been 2 or 3 attempts on your life?
Two.
Okay,
You just need to
no
be
kidding.
careful and act accordingly.
For the business that you work in, you wouldn't be able to operate without these guys taking you through countries.
No, I wouldn't feel safe. It is like
Yeah, so again, it does say entrepreneur. I don't know exactly what would constitute an entrepreneur these days, but yeah, I wonder how they sort of pick their VIPs, if there's any sort of like ethical screening process for who they're actually going to guard and whatnot, or if it's somebody that is willing to spend a lot of money. And I think for a lot of these companies, that might be the case just because, I mean, again, they might not necessarily be in the business of screening ethics or sort of trying to understand a culture if they can just do their job and be security. So it is a really odd thing for me. It's not something that I would consider getting into. Contracting seemed cool when I was a junior enlisted because, you know, it sounded like it has a lot of money involved, but yeah, it's just, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens behind the scenes that I don't really want to see or be involved with.
I like having a top private army, because not only is the quantity, but they are quality. I'm in a little war, and when I land in this country, I'm at war, and then that's why you need to use these good bad guys.
Okay.
While providing highly trained security for VIPs like Pablo is one role PMCs play, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, the international private military industry has been exploding over the last 20 years. To find out more about this new modern world of mercenaries, we spoke to P.W. Singer, author of the book Corporate Warriors, The Rise of the Privatized Military Industry.
Oh, snap.
Private
Okay.
military company, a PMC, is private companies taking on roles that have traditionally been done by the military and intelligence agencies, by the broader national security complex. We have this assumption of war and who fights it. A man in uniform.
I mean, all throughout history, there have been mercenaries or, like swords for hire. So I think that's not necessarily the case. They have been around for as long as, there have been wars. So it's pretty understandable for them to still exist today in some capacity. I think some people are just surprised at what sort of capacity they actually exist now. I mean, for me, I still don't have a good grasp or understanding, but I have a pretty good appreciation for, if there's somebody that has a lot of money, they want a little bit extra security, they want to skirt some of the rules or get around some other rules that the military would enact, then that's a good way to do it.
And that uniform to us means, well, they're part of a national military. And when you look at the 21st century, that image in our mind, it just doesn't hold true. These companies have taken on all the different roles of war, everything from the back-end logistics to training and consulting to the tactical battlefield roles. Pretty much it's the new American way of war. Whether you're talking about Iraq or now Afghanistan, roughly half of the force there is private military.
In fact, business is so good that the global market for private security services is projected to reach $218 billion in 2014. And as more and more aspects of modern war and security are outsourced to PMCs, these companies are poised to grow even larger.
Outsourcing is always about cost savings. It's the number of people that you don't have to call up from your National Guard and Reserves to take on these roles. Deaths, injuries, capture of private military contractors doesn't resonate into the political world the same way it does for someone in the military.
That's a good point.
So we're seeing everything from companies that have been operating in Iraq now doing things like counter-piracy operations off Somalia to the emergence of Chinese private security companies operating in Africa or the Russian.
Yeah, so that is... I mean, I don't know. I mean, you also need to consider on the flip side, if you're trying to join one of these private military companies where they're like, yeah, if you get captured, it's not going to be a political thing. So it's a little bit easier for us to sort of wash our hands and, dust off. But I think if you're going to work for a PMC, you're going to understand that. And a lot of times, it's not really something that you're going to be burdened or bothered by because you're there for the money. You have a skill that you can offer to them. And that's it. It's business at the end of the day.
The Russians use private contractors during their Crimea operation. When we look at the future frontiers of the private military industry, they reflect the next frontiers of war.
To find out more about this massive industry that is fast becoming the future of war, we spoke to the man that almost single-handedly created the modern PMC as we know it.
We're here in Abu Dhabi and we're going to interview one of the most important people in the PMC world, Eric Prince. He was the founder of Blackwater.
PMCs are as American as Thanksgiving Day. First colonies were started by contractors that were hired to secure the logistics of private companies. Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth colonies were private endeavors. Look, I started Blackwater as a way to stay connected to the SEAL teams. When our customers called us, we ran very hard to fill their needs. We were mischaracterized as out-of-control mercenaries. And the fact is we were American veterans serving America again, getting paid on a competitively bid contract. Full stop. We did exactly.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding Blackwater when I was joining the military. I don't really know what it was. I never really researched it. But I think everybody knew what Blackwater was. Blackwater knew what Blackwater was. but I think it's sometimes the execution doesn't necessarily work out the way that everybody's expecting, and that's where things can get kind of ugly as well.
Exactly the job the U.S. government hired us to do, and did it well. More than 100,000 missions on the security side. No one under our care ever killed or injured.
I don't know about
For
that.
a first-hand look to see what it takes to become a soldier for hire, we traveled to the Czech Republic to the Anti-Terror Academy, a former military base, which is now one of the most popular security training facilities in Europe.
Really? Oh my gosh. It just looks like chaos. Good grief.
This is where future PMC soldiers are going to be freshening up their skills before they go out and work. In theory, even people like me can do these training courses and basically be gungs for hire.
Make sure you focus on that foresight.
Okay.
Squeeze in the trigger.
Although they're willing to train beginners like me,
Damn.
it was clear that a vast majority of the guys there were former elite military running through combat drills.
How did you get into all of this?
So I left the army because the money wasn't good enough.
There you go.
Why would I do 5 years in Iraq in the army and earn 120 grand when I can do 2 years in Iraq and earn 400 grand? Certainly in my era, anybody who was any good in the army isn't in the army anymore.
Yeah,
The main
you will
goal
hear
of a
that and
facility
see it.
like this is to take the elite skills these soldiers already have for offensive combat and reshape them to provide defensive, special forces level security and protection.
I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about all the guys that I knew that went and joined a PMC, and they were not the best of the best. They don't need to be the best of best. I mean, you have to think, if you have a military background, if you have military training, even for three or 4 years, that is a lot of experience that can go into this sort of organization, as opposed to getting someone who's a civilian and hasn't really been exposed to that sort of level of, you know, weapon training or discipline or professionalism. And it's very easy to translate the military to a PMC, but I wouldn't necessarily say you have the best guys leaving the military to go and join them. It will happen. They'll sort of start their own things sometimes as well, but that's definitely not the case all the time.
As I watched them run their drills, it was clear that these maneuvers were much more than just defensive. They aren't only learning to provide additional support and security, they are essentially becoming their own army. Nobody knows more about what it means to have private armies for hire than the world-famous mercenary Simon Mann. After serving in the British Special Forces, he spent over 20 years in the PMC industry until 2004, when he served 5 years in prison in Equatorial Guinea for his role in attempting to help stage a coup.
A private military company, to me, is a company that is prepared to carry out full-on offensive military operations under a contract. You know, you pay us a load of money and we will help you win your war. Where I get worried is when you start saying, no, the way forward is for combat operations to be privatized and given out wholesale to the private sector. There are certain things that armies have to do and a way of doing them that should not be in the private sector. These guys are
I feel like there's a little bit of a hidden meaning there, but I definitely understand what he's talking about. And it's pretty obvious to see. You're not going to use, even though, you know, PMCs have a lot of money, they're not going to be able to do things on the same scale as a military would. And they're not going to want to invest. I mean, again, it is a business. They're not going to put these people and these resources into things that they know is not really going to provide a profitable outcome in the end.
fighting for money. They're not fighting for the state. They're not fighting out of a sense of duty or patriotism. When it gets serious is if you get a PMC that starts to get excessively muscular.
Okay.
The line between defense and offense gets very quickly blurred. So immediately, any decent soldiers will start thinking, instead of sitting here waiting to be shot, why don't we go out there and bag the bad guys before they manage to shoot us? And suddenly, you know, the rules start to get bent.
I understand that, but what I'm thinking about is, I know there are people in the military that are just not the best, but they're there, they're collecting a paycheck, and they're going to continue to collect a paycheck because they're on a contract. But for these guys, I wonder how they sort of do the contract as well, because you might just be able to have like scumbags collecting pretty big paychecks that are just doing like the bare minimum. I wonder, I'm sure there's like different tiers of, you getting paid to be in a sort of leadership or supervisory role, but even still, like some of the lower guys will still get paid pretty decent. And I don't know if they have like specific formal evaluations or whatnot, but yeah, it is kind of interesting to think about that sort of perspective as well.
The further you look into the training around the world for PMCs, the more you realize that their public face as simply defensive security is only one side to their capabilities.
So we're here to see Mick Cowan. He's a former sniper and he's now a PMC. He's asked us to keep his location secret because he just doesn't want people to know where this is going on. We're going to spend a little bit of time with him and kind of find out what he does, how it all works.
I operate as a consultant for a number of companies, and I step in and provide the actual instructional ability.
Simply put, he trains PMCs to be snipers using the latest military techniques and hardware.
Basically an AR-15 M4 with a red dot sight on it.
Sniping with the EO
It's not just about shooting accuracy. They also teach you how to blend in with your environment, so your target doesn't even know you exist.
Jed, you got to be very low and slow.
It's like the perfect terrain for a ghillie too.
I'll check if I can spot him, and I will radio the walker.
Okay, is that him in position again?
Okay, roger.
Man, it's like literally like sniper school and doing
kind of
stocks.
contracts that come along that you just morally don't agree with and you don't take?
Yeah, certainly there would be jobs that I could see coming along that I would go, thanks, but no thanks. But morality is down to the individual and down to the companies themselves. You always get people who are morally repugnant. You always get cowboys.
But it's not only the moral question of who these cowboys might work for that makes many uneasy. For veteran journalist Robert Pelton, who witnessed the rise of the PMC in both Iraq and Afghanistan firsthand, it's a concern about their willingness to blur the lines if it serves their purpose.
It is a myth to assume that contractors are aligned with governments and they synchronize. They actually have opposing goals.
Yeah, that is interesting because obviously in the military, you're serving a specific country or government. So you're going to have a pretty clear line of sight as far as, good guy or bad guy. For a PMC, it might be a little bit more fluid or flexible as far as these guys are generally considered bad, but, right now they can help us out or it might benefit us a little bit more later on. They have a little more flexibility in deciding that. While obviously like a unit commander is not going to do that because that would be considered treason, in a lot of different fields, especially in the military itself.
And there are many cases in which contractors were actually arrested by the military in Iraq for doing exactly that, shooting at people, causing a mess.
Shot in front of him. He may have ricocheted and hit his car, but...
It's security, but it doesn't seem like security because it's to keep them secure. If I come up and punch you in the face and I say that's for your protection, that's kind of the joke. You see fences going up, you see guard posts, you see people stopping you, and you say, that's not a police badge. And it's up to the public to decide whether they think the use of force by a non-state actor is appropriate.
In fact, the actions of some PMCs has caused such an alarm that US Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky has introduced legislation to limit them from use in war zones altogether.
There has been concern about using people who don't wear the badge of the United States of America, who are not part of a chain of command, who aren't held accountable in the same ways. I think what scares me the most about these private military contractors is that by and large they operate in the shadows. The transparency isn't there, the accountability isn't there. It appears that these contractors literally may be able to get away with murder.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's necessarily that extreme. To be fair, I don't know the history of like PMCs or times where it's really gone like very sour, but I can understand where the US government might be a little bit afraid for these guys doing what they're doing. And that's just because they don't want to have someone think it's the military and cause an international incident. But generally speaking, I think PMCs will take responsibility for everything that they're doing. And, if somebody does something wrong, they're probably just going to get fired. They might not necessarily go to jail, I think in the military, you'd be way more likely to go to jail because obviously you're not going to get fired from the military. It doesn't really work like that. Although the repercussions might be different, or there might be some politics or bureaucracy happening behind the scenes, I don't think it's necessarily going to be getting away with murder. But again, I'm not sure. If you guys have any specific instances, or if you want to share your own opinions about PMCs from what you've seen, then definitely throw it down below, because yeah, I'm kind of just trying to take everything that's they're saying with a grain of salt, because I'm just not knowledgeable to say otherwise.
When you consider that these companies might operate above the law, even while employed by the US government, the bigger question for New York Times Washington correspondent David Sanger is what happens when PMCs work completely outside the jurisdiction of America itself.
One big concern for private military contractors is a question of allegiance. When they become political instruments to help prop up a government, that's when you begin to ask the question, does this corporation have a foreign policy of its own? And is that corporation's foreign policy in sync or in opposition to American foreign policy? Are they truly American, or are they truly international? Who exactly are they working for?
Yeah, that is kind of interesting, huh? It's hard to say sometimes.
When the best and the brightest from armies around the world are now working for PMCs, you have to wonder if the next military superpower won't be a country, but a corporation.
I think the PMC of the future can manipulate governments. We're at a stage now that I think it can happen.
I'm not necessarily sure they had the political sort of footprint or reach, but yeah, I mean, money speaks, so everybody knows that. So definitely a cool video. And yeah, I don't know a whole lot about PMCs, I will say that much. I mean, I know buddies who have gone and served under PMCs, and usually it's people that were not the best. I will say, I think I know maybe 8 people who have gone into contracting after the military, and 7 of them, 6 or 7, were just like not very good. Probably like the bottom of the barrel of Marines and soldiers, if I'm being honest. I do know some people who have, you know, prior special forces going and moving into something like that. I've seen that, and that makes sense. But it kind of works out, because you'll see prior special forces people go and start their own company or business, and then they'll come back and teach the military all that stuff, which works pretty well. I mean, in the infantry, we had a bunch of special forces dudes like prior Delta and Green Berets and Rangers come and teach us what they were taught, which doesn't even happen in the military. Like, you will have Green Berets come and teach infantry guys stuff sometimes, but it is very, very rare. I was taught a lot of the advanced stuff that I learned from, you know, civilians or veterans who have started their own company. It's not always the case, but it is kind of cool how it sort of perpetuates that. So as far as a PMC becoming like a military superpower, I would say that's not necessarily possible, because people get out with the intention of coming back and teaching the military. So it's not always about money, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's definitely cool. It's definitely an interesting topic. I just don't know enough about it, especially the history. So if you guys have your own experiences, or if you've served in a PMC, then yeah, let me know how that was, because I think we'd all like to hear some sort of firsthand accounts of how it can go good or how it can go bad. Because I can imagine if you're getting dudes who just have military experience in general, might not necessarily be the best guys, and sometimes it can kind of muddy the waters a bit. I mean, everybody knows there's a million different opinions out there, and mine is not necessarily going to be more important than any of y'all. It's just because I'm the one making the video. So definitely feel free to share your thoughts and your experiences and your opinions down in the comment section so we can check them out. But that is it for this video. I'll see y'all in the next one.